This week on Got Clutter, Get Organized, the conversation. A lot of times we inherit those things, and then all we do is we just kind of shove them in a closet, in an attic, in a basement, and we don't use them. Begin to use the items. Enjoy the items. Our mothers didn't leave us the stuff just for the stuff, just to sit around it. Maybe, yes, they didn't use it, but it's time for us to break with tradition, start a new tradition, and use the stuff. Hello, I am so excited to be with you this week because I want to talk about what my mother taught me about the stuff, the time, as well as letting go. And I want to encourage you to actually share some of your stories as well in the comments below. So let's talk about the stuff, the shoes, the jewelry, the handbags, and all the other items in her home and in her life. One of the things I loved that my mother did not put restrictions on what I could actually play with. So I played with her jewelry. I used to sit on the floor, open that jewelry box, play with her jewelry. Sometimes I walked in her shoes. Sometimes I would play with her handbags. Now I do still have some of the handbags and I still have some of the jewelry. And of course, I still, have some of the things, like some of her china. I don't have it all, but I have some of the china. And of course, I have her traveling trunk. And again, she allowed me to enjoy the items. And that's really why I wanted to have this conversation, is because a lot of times we inherit those things, and then all we do is we just kind of shove them in a closet, in an attic, in a basement, and we don't use them. Begin to use the items. Enjoy the items. Our mothers didn't leave us the stuff just for the stuff, just to sit around it. Maybe, yes, they didn't use it, but it's time for us to break with tradition, start a new tradition, and use the stuff. Wear the clothes, use the shop, wear the jewelry, wear the jewelry. I remember one time somebody had a pajamas and bling party, and it allowed me to wear all of my mother's bling. So, and then when I get to use those handbags, I use those handbags. So, and of course, I use the trunk, I use the china, I use a tray that used to be for sandwiches. I now use it for perfume bottles. Use the stuff, repurpose the stuff. So make sure you do that. And also, I use a tin can that she used to own, and I actually put pearls in it because I actually have a lot of pearls. I had friends who sold jewelry. I sold jewelry, had my mother's pearls. So I decided to just contain all the pearls in the beautiful, and it's still beautifully colored tin can. So make sure you keep everything. Keep it and use it. Let's talk about the time and the moments. And I remember because, well, when I was growing up, it was PBS. So we would always find some documentary. We would just sit there and watch it. We would have those conversations, and sometimes we would actually have conversations about the stuff. We would talk about, her trunk and all the travel she took. We would talk about the photos, and one of the photos actually, she's pictured with the yellow gloves. A lot of you have already heard the story of the yellow gloves that come past my elbows. The yellow gloves. And the story of how she was in the wedding. I have the pictures. I still have the invitation. And it's just those stories. And also getting back to the stuff, I have her paintings. She did watercolor. So I have those paintings and they're throughout my home. So it's beginning to use the stuff, but also remembering, because when I look at the stuff, I remember the conversations. I remember my mother. So again, it's about those times, the time and the conversations. So think about those things as well. And then, of course, even looking at back at my little photos of me, because all the photos she took and all the, patent leather shoes she bought me. And I still remember the conversation one time after I had become an adult, and she was like, you like patent leather shoes. And I was able to pull out the photos, have another conversation, spend some more time with her, and says, well, if you look at every last one of these pictures, I have on a different pair of patent leather shoes. So sometimes it's just remembering those things. But also, the letting go. Now, one of the things I learned from my mother, and I'm sure you got stories too, is that Tuesday night was the night before trash day. So therefore, she would go in the freezer, the refrigerator. She would gather things and start bagging things that needed to be discarded the next day. She would, take the newspapers because we would, always get the daily newspaper, the Sunday newspaper, and she would actually tie them up so they would go out to recycle. So I learned those habits from her. It's like when she finished the newspapers, this where it went. Once it was, Tuesday night, these are all the things we do because we're going to let go. We are going to get rid of what we are no longer using and what we no longer need in regards to trash. And then we'll make room for more newspapers, more, food in the refrigerator because food that's old and stale and, expired is not taking up valuable space. So, sometimes just looking back at some of the things they did, some of the rituals they did, I still remember in regards to how she managed her time. She was working full time. And on Saturday she would do the cleaning of the house, but she would also, clean clothes. And then she would also, we would go at that time, we would go to the 5 and 10 or the Woolworth and just pick up a few items. How she managed that time, because that was our time together. And I bet you have stories as well. Because sometimes we look at stuff and we cherish stuff, which is wonderful, but use the stuff. Remember the times, but also know that in all of that, does the things that you have in your home, in your life, that may have belonged to your mother figure, do they need to be go on to just, a new home, a new life? So I hope that you share some stories because this is May. We're leading up to Mother's Day, and I'm sure you got some great stories as well. And I want to hear them in the comments below. But again, the stuff, looking back, cherish the stuff, but use it. Does she have a brooch? Does she have a scarf? Does she have a bag, a handbag, a coat? What is it? Or maybe it's some dishes. Pull them out and have your own tea party. Don't always wait until the right time and just have a tea party. And then maybe take out the photos and look at the photos, look at the videos, have the conversation. One of the things that always reminds me of my mother is a movie called Three Coins in the Fountain. I remember when we watched it together. So, sometimes it could be doing something like that, but also knowing when something is no longer useful, is it time to let it go? One of the things I mentioned in this week's audio episode, the Toss It Tuesday. If you don't listen to the audio episode, I suggest you do. And the Toss It Tuesday is that I got rid of some old sneakers. I wore them. They served their purpose. But all of a sudden, I realized one day I came home and it had been raining. I realized my foot is wet. Why is my foot wet? Well, that was because the sole had split. And I'm going to be honest with you. It took me a little while to let it go, but it has served its purpose. I couldn't wear them anymore because if I wore them outside, my feet would get wet if it was raining. And either way, I do not need to be wearing sneakers with splits in the soles. So I hope this encourages you, maybe even just to go in the closet and get rid of something, a pair of shoes that are worn and no longer useful. Maybe in the cabinet, maybe in your home, in your life. So I want to know. So please leave some comments below. Now, of course, if you listen to the audio version, continue listening because I've got some more tips like Toss It Tuesday. But of course, if you are just, watching this via YouTube, thank you so much for joining me. Please share this with your mother figure, your friends, other female family members, and just start a conversation. Start a conversation about the stuff. Everybody gather around and just kind of share their favorite outfit, their favorite fashionista moment with that person. Maybe Also share a precious time moment, but also share a moment when you realize they were ready to let go, whether it was something physical or maybe emotional. So, again, please let me know in the comments below. So, what was your takeaway from my solo conversation? Did it invoke some memories of what your mother wore, or maybe those conversations, or just you and her just cleaning and organizing? Please let me know in the comments below. Of course, I want to thank you so much for joining me. If you aren't already subscribed to this channel, please do so. And of course, make sure you share this conversation with a woman who you know and love. Well, until next time, I want you to have a clutter-free day.